With championship starting for many, or some in the midst of it, it's time to start loading up on fuel, specifically carbohydrates. But many players get this wrong. This video is going to look at some of the common mistakes players make when carb loading, but more importantly, give you the tools and information to make it as easy and enjoyable as possible so you can fuel up with foods you like eating and also make sure you're performing to your best at the very end of the game. Carbohydrates were demonised a bit in the past, pushing low carb diets, ketogenic diets, all like that. Thankfully, people are realising that they are the key fuel source for the majority of actions in the pitch. On your tackles, sprints, runs, essentially everything you do when playing is fueled by glycogen. That glycogen comes from all the carbohydrate you eat. The more intense a game, or the longer the game, or training you play, the more carbohydrate you need before that and afterwards to recover. Despite carbohydrates now being recognised as the main fuel source, a lot of players still get their carbohydrate loading wrong. And this comes from two main reasons. Either they don't eat enough, or they eat too much of the wrong things, or some combination of the two. We're going to look at a few examples, strategies and case studies to make sure you or the players you're coaching are eating enough. If you check the description below, you'll get a nutrition cheat sheet that'll give you plenty of information on carbohydrate loading, but also all the other factors that drive performance in terms of nutrition for you or your players. And this is suitable for both adults and adolescents. I do a good few workshops with teams. Go in, give them a talk, here's just some foods you can eat, pull together a load of here is guidance around a game at 7:30 on Friday evening, a game at 2 o'clock Sunday. Here are the best few foods that'll fuel you with a couple of different options around your own individual preferences. Like even the teams I work with in terms of coaching, I'd still be hammering the importance of carbohydrate. So I was pushing this to a player recently. Just want to work with a small bit on an individual level and say, look, championship in about a month's time, you need to start fueling up now so you're ready for it. So it's not like a big hit in the day before. You figure out the foods you like eating, that you react well to, and you just train your stomach to digest all this stuff when it comes time for a match. And I suggest a few easy to eat foods for him. Next game I said, right, what did you eat? He said, oh yeah, I ate loads. Tell me, come on, let's go through it and see exactly what I ate. So he said, I had eggs on toast for breakfast. And I said, any more? Surely you had a bit more. Oh yeah, I had a bowl of Cocoa Pops along with it. Great, that's good now. What you have for break? Yogurt and a banana. Then at lunchtime he had pasta, veg and rice. How much pasta? 50 grams. Didn't seem like a whole pile. Another bowl of Cocoa Pops around 3 o'clock. Then he got home at 5, had more chicken, pasta and veg. Again, 50 grams of pasta. And he had a cereal bar in the car on the way to the match. So I quickly threw it on to my fitness pal. Not like the super or most accurate, but gave me a general guideline, like how much. I didn't throw in all the fuel because I wasn't looking specifically at protein or fat consumption, just purely carbohydrate. And it added up to 230 grams of carbohydrate. That's 920 calories coming from carbohydrate. So even if you're to add up, if he's getting enough protein and fats, he's still probably just above 2,000 calories there. So for someone in around 80 kg, on general day to day, that's barely enough. But if you fuel up for a game, definitely not enough. So specifically, how much should we be consuming? It's by having a good bit of experience and work with various teams and individuals across a few different sports, predominantly GAA. I have drawn from a few different sources, and I'll flash these up and just tease them out if you want to go look them up in a bit more detail yourself. One of the main books or texts I would draw from is Food for Sports Performance by Louise Burke. While it doesn't specifically address Gaelic football, hurling, camogie or LGFA, it does draw from rugby, soccer and field hockey, which in terms of physiological and nutritional demands are quite similar to the GAA, albeit with slightly different game lengths. To draw from more GAA-specific research, I looked at Ian Maguire's work around carbohydrate intake and the lack of it, Luke O'Brien's work, again looking at carbohydrate intake and how many players don't meet it, and some of my own previous work which looked at nutrition knowledge and quality diet amongst GAA players. I also looked at, although slightly older, Barcelona FC's guide to nutrition recommendations in general, specifically meeting what's required in terms of carbohydrate. Like I said, it's a little bit older, but a lot of the recommendations do hold true. But to put more of a specific individual nature on this, I drew from some of the work by Asker You Can Drop, who has published work around personalised nutrition to try and meet each individual's demands as opposed to making broad, generic recommendations for everyone. The recommendations suggest 7 to 12 grams of carbohydrate per kg of body weight. What does that mean for an individual? A 65 kg player needs between 455 and 780 grams of carbohydrate. A 75 kg player needs between 525 and 900, whereas an 85 kg player needs between 595 and just over 1,000. That's an awful lot of carbohydrate to consume, just in terms of pure volume of food, alongside whatever protein or fats you might take in. Now, first of all, these are quite large ranges. From 525 to 900 grams, that's almost double. There's a big range here that you go between, should you be at the lower end or the higher end, and obviously that's going to depend on you as an individual, your position and your output in games. But these recommendations are also based off senior inter-county players who play 70 to 75 minute games, would have slightly higher output than your traditional club player, and they're also probably factoring in a 30-minute warm-up there as well. So realistically, at club level, we should probably be aiming for the lower end of those recommendations or at least the lower third. And that's just as a general guideline to start off. If we feel we could consume more and we have a big jump in energy from that, then definitely let's look to push the bit. Club players can probably aim for the 6 to 9 grams per kg end of the recommendations. If we take our example above, he took in 230 grams of carbohydrate. He's about 80 kg. He realistically needs between 580 and 950 grams, which means he's consuming less than half what he needs. Just before we jump into looking at how to actually meet those recommendations and the foods we use to get there, we'll first look to see why is it actually really important to consume this much carbohydrate and what are some of the negative effects of not. A few of the key points that came from the work of Luke O'Brien and Amy Maguire, as already mentioned, and drawn in from numerous other sports who have seen the long-term impacts of not consuming enough carbohydrate. In a really simple sense, it's just about not having enough energy coming in means you just don't have enough energy to go out. Think of a car journey anywhere you want to go. If you don't have enough fuel in the car, you simply can't make it. The car will break down before you get there. It's the same for players. If they don't consume enough fuel, they just can't have the output wanted in games, regardless of how much training or fitness has been built up in advance. Not eating enough carbs before training or games means players will run out of energy quicker and won't perform at their best. They'll often feel heavy and sluggish, especially later in the game, and they just won't be able to sprint or cover ground like they normally would. As well as fueling the games you're playing, recovery will also be massively impaired after each game and training. Without enough carbs, muscles don't refuel properly, which leaves the players tired for the next session. And in championship windows now in the split season, there tends to be a short enough turnaround from game to training, and from training to game. If you're not fueling for one and then recovering from it enough in the time frame allowed, you're just not going to be able to have the output and to be able to recover week on week, as is demand nowadays. This poor recovery over time increases the risk of overtraining and can lead to burnout or longer term fatigue, and that has numerous other health effects. Low carb diets, whether intentional or not, can weaken your immune system. This leads to players getting sick more often, struggling to shake off colds or any other little illnesses that they might pick up. Low carbohydrate intake or low energy availability in general is also going to greatly increase the risk of injury, especially stress fractures, other little niggly bits that even if you do pick up, will take much longer to heal. Also, without enough carbs, the brain just doesn't function as well. Your muscles can store up carbohydrate, but your brain unfortunately can't. Loss of focus, poor decisions, particularly the last 5 or 10 minutes of the game when you're already under pressure, or just feeling mentally foggy during games can often come from a lack of carbohydrate or fuel sources, as opposed to you being unable to cope with the pressures placed on you. Finally, if done in the longer term, no matter how hard you're training, you're just not going to be able to adapt to it. It can limit the fitness gains you're trying to make and may even lead to muscle breakdown and cause the injuries, as we've already mentioned. Now we've looked at some of the negative effects. What are some of the best foods to eat? If you're looking at the YouTube version or the video version on Spotify, you'll see I'm sharing my screen here, so you can actually look at a list of foods, typical serving sizes and how much carbohydrate or grams of carbohydrate are in each one, and then just a little ideal use case. Now, as I mentioned already, there's a little nutrition cheat sheet guide below that'll give you this and a little bit more context around it, around where to use each one or where it can fit in the lead into a game, but we'll just go through these one by one. If you're not looking at the video version, I will still call everything out. It just might be a little bit harder to take it on board or keep to memory without a little visual to go along with it. So you can see one of the best here, based on one typical serving, that's probably actually half a serving, but so be it, is a pizza base. And these will be the ones that buy yourself. Now you can, if you do get like some of the Goodfellas deep pan ones or the knockoff Aldi or little version of deep pan ones, the base is quite thick and that will have really good source of carbohydrate. Just be conscious of what's on top. If it's like triple loaded cheese or extra pepperoni, there will just be a lot of fat there. Night before the game, you'll probably get away with it. 2 hours before the game, that's probably a terrible idea. There'll just be too much going on in your belly before you go doing all the typical running around and stuff. Your other classic ones in here are your pasta, a white rice or basmati rice, a typical 75 gram uncooked there, and you can obviously bulk up the portion size these. They're all going to give you 55 to 58 grams of carbohydrate. So let's just take it and say I'm 80 kg, so I'd be aiming for between 600 and 700 grams of carbohydrate in the lead into a game. So I look to pull all these together. A bagel can be really nice, you're looking at 45 grams here. But even if you look at the lower end, some rice cakes, like 2 large rice cakes, sure there's nothing really in them, but it can be a nice handy light snack despite only having 14 grams, but that's one serving. You can look well outside the typical servings for this or have numerous servings to bulk up how much you're eating. We have a jam sandwich, and that's just like typical white bread and a bit of jam. That's also going to give you 45 grams. Your flapjacks here, now these will vary wildly based on the type of flapjack you buy. You can get like the Flahaven ones. There isn't a huge amount in them. There are the other ones in, I can't remember the exact brand of them. Bread, baps, rolls, they're all going to be really good and quite easy to consume fairly quick digesting carbohydrates as well. Spuds are okay, can be a little bit higher on the fibre end and a little bit slower to digest. They're also just a little bit bulkier in terms of how much calories they have. Scones are excellent. You can see going into some of the liquid calories now, you have Lucozade Sport, so a 500ml bottle will give you 32 grams. If you're someone that really struggles to get solid carbohydrates on board, liquids can be a help here, and we'll look at a few strategies or examples around that as we go through it. A typical large banana will have about 30 grams of carbohydrate. Wraps are really good here. The shop-bought pancakes are excellent. 2 of those will have about 30 grams of carbohydrate for you. You could easily eat a pack of 8, and by adding some Nutella or bits of fruit or maple syrup, it's quite easy to bulk that out with more carbohydrate as well. People often ask, should they get the protein pancakes? Honestly, no need whatsoever. Just get the normal, simple ones. If you're carbohydrate loading, you're getting so many calories on board, the protein isn't actually quite as much of a priority on those days. You just have so much fuel going through your system. Anyway, recovery won't really be compromised. Plus, it's going to be hard not to take on enough protein if you are just eating a large volume of food. Anyway, Jaffa cakes, creamed rice, Cocoa Pops, crunchy nut cornflakes. The majority of cereals, particularly the higher in sugar ones, are going to be really good here. If you look like it's your wholemeal bread, it's a little bit lower in carbohydrate than white bread. It's also just harder to eat a lot of. Similar for Weetabix, hard to eat an awful lot of Weetabix, and is that bit higher in carbohydrate. Porridge oats, I'm often unsure here. Some people respond really well to porridge. I don't like it too close to a game at all. The morning of a game, great, ideal. If I blend it up, I can make pancakes with it. But in terms of a bowl of porridge, either overnight oats or the normal warm stuff before I go play, I just find it too hard to digest and it doesn't sit right. I know a few others struggle the same, but others find it absolutely fine. That's obviously going to be a personal one. Apples and oranges as light snacks can be great, whereas your juices like orange or apple, they can be a really easy way to get a lot of carbohydrate on, particularly without having to do too much chewing or stuff that might just slow down your digestion and everything that way. Some of the cereals, just be wary of, they're actually quite low in calories. Like Rice Krispies is one example here. A large-ish 45 gram bowl of Rice Krispies is 36 grams of carbohydrate. It's not like 45 grams of Rice Krispies, that's a really big bowl because there's just so much volume and air in them, so it actually takes a bit of a while. Like you'll fill a bowl, you'll be like, oh, massive bowl, great. You're not actually getting a huge amount there, whereas like Cocoa Pops, the same amount in terms of weight will actually be a much smaller bowl of stuff. Similar for Cheerios, whereas like your Crunchy Nut cornflakes or the Crunchy Nut clusters are a great one as well. There's just so much more carbohydrate in a similar size bowl, it will just be heavier for it and can just be way easier to get the carbohydrates on board through something like that than your typical more healthy versions of cereal, we'll call them. The likes of bran flakes, shredded wheat, I wouldn't really advise these here. They're just, for general health, they're probably a lot better. They're just too high in fibre to digest the amount of carbohydrate we want as quickly as possible leading into a game. Some easy options then to just bulk it up with extra carbohydrate that don't really fill your belly, or some simple strategies to help you get a bit more on board without feeling a little overwhelmed with the amount of volume on your plate. Or like, say if you're having pancakes, to add some maple syrup or Nutella to those, or if you're having a bagel or toast, put some jam or honey or the aforementioned Nutella on those. You don't really notice the extra amount of volume there, but it's loads of extra carbohydrates, predominantly from sugar, that will digest nice and fast, on top of something you would have been eating anyway without any extra bulk or filling up your stomach anymore. Juices can be really helpful here. General day-to-day living, I don't really recommend juices. I think you lose a lot of the goodness from fruit when you consume a juice, i.e. the fibre and the filling bit. However, orange juice, apple juice being a big favourite here, one of the cheaper ones as well, can be a really good way of getting a lot of that sugary carbohydrate on board in a way that's quite easy to digest, won't fill you up too much, and can be accompanied alongside like a normal carbohydrate-based meal. While Cristiano Ronaldo obviously wouldn't recommend it, standard red can Coca-Cola here can be really useful. The fizz, if close to the game, maybe not ideal. Wouldn't have it close to bedtime because of the caffeine content. But in terms of just straight sugar or carbohydrate, your normal Coke or any of the cheap knockoff versions of it can be a useful way of getting extra carbohydrate on board. Some simple ways then to double up your typical meals. It'd be, say, if you're having a wrap and you're putting some chicken or beef or whatever you like to have in your wrap, put a couple of scoops of rice in there as well. It doesn't hugely bulk it up, you're just going to eat the wrap anyway, but it has all the extra carbohydrate from the rice there. If you're having some pasta bolognese, and pasta is a great way of getting the carbohydrate on board, to have a side dish of garlic bread along with that, they go really well together anyway. Plus, it's an easy way again to get more carbs on board without feeling you need to bulk it up too much with just extra pasta or have an extra meal an hour later. Naan breads or something else along those lines can also work well if you're having something like a curry or something more like spicy based. It can also complement what you're eating. We're going to look at 4 simple strategies to help you effectively carb load. Before that, I want to give you 2 caveats. First one is, different strategies are going to suit different people, and that's going to be dependent around your job, your personal preferences, the food you like to eat, your own mindset and associations with food, but also just what fits your daily life, and I suppose to an extent what time the match or the game is actually going to be at. You'll also need to practice whatever it is you're doing well in advance, because you don't want to make this big jump, and this is my second caveat, from our example earlier of 230 grams per day and jump that straight up to 800 or 900 grams in a day, because you're just not going to feel good. You'll feel incredibly bloated. You'll really struggle to actually consume that much fuel. You'll be going to the toilet an awful lot more than you would have anyway. When you actually do get to match day, you'll actually just feel sluggish from it all because you're not used to digesting that much at once. So that's why we need to build it up a little bit over time. So you might look to go from 230 grams for the match, the example we gave there, to say you're playing an in-house game maybe a week later. And 24 hours before that in-house game, you might look to try and consume 350 grams. That's a jump of 100 grams of carbohydrate. You should notice a big jump in the amount of energy you feel having during the game there, but also how much extra you have to eat to lead up to that. Next thing then might be a league match or a practice match. You're going to try and increase from 350 grams to 400, 420, maybe 450 grams here, just by adding little bits throughout the day, extra additions to your meal, larger portion sizes, or just an extra snack somewhere. And we'll look at those strategies in a second. Then hopefully you've built up to 500, 550 come championship time. You do not want that to be the first time you're consuming that much, that amount, or those types of carbohydrate. You should have practiced a couple of times prior to championship time so you're ready for it. I was working with a team a few years ago, and at the end of the season, we were just doing a quick little review, and I said, what was the biggest difference? We probably trained as hard as we always did. We probably felt as fit and trained as we always did. We just had far better performance in games because we really forced the fueling. The first few league games felt incredibly uncomfortable and thought this was crazy. But by the time their stomachs got a little bit more trained at actually digesting that much fuel, and they got used to having those energy stores at the back end of a game, they were able to have those outputs far later into the game and still being really strong. Even come to the last game where we ended up having extra time, they were still outputting at the same level. So it's about building up and training yourself to use all that fuel to get the benefits of all the training you've done up to that. First strategy is going to be a little bit of a blunt instrument coming in. If we take our sample meal from earlier, the toast and eggs, Cocoa Pops scattered throughout today, 230 grams of carbohydrate. A really simple way of just getting enough on board. Probably not the best way or the most enjoyable, but will tick that box of extra carbohydrate is you just get a box of sugary-ish cereal, Cocoa Pops, Crunchy Nut clusters, your own preference here really. And over the course of the day, eat the majority of that box. Have a bowl alongside your normal breakfast, have a bowl as a morning snack. Essentially with every meal, you finish it off with a bowl of that, and maybe twice over the course of the day, you also have an extra bowl. Ideally with low-fat milk here, and as you work your way through that, once it's palatable enough, you'll actually look forward to generally the taste of it. By the final bowl, you might be a bit oh, I'm fed up with this, but so be it. It will give you just enough extra carbohydrate you need to meet those recommendations going into a game. The second option then is to be looking at baseline food again, but look to increase overall the portion sizes and to add some sides or side dishes to what we're eating. So for example, the night before, so say if you have a game Friday night 7:30, Thursday night you're going to have your big bowl of pasta bolognese and you'll have your garlic bread or your naan bread alongside that. When you get up and have your breakfast in the morning, whether it be overnight oats or normal on the pot oats, you're just going to have a much bigger serving. If you normally have 60 grams of oats, you're going to have 100 to 120. If you normally have eggs on toast, instead of having 2 slices of toast, you're going to have 4. Where you normally have a piece of fruit and a bit of yogurt, you're going to have a scone along with that. Still have what you normally have, but the scone with a bit of jam on it as well. If you like to go and get a wrap with some chicken or beef or tuna or whatever you like in your wrap, you're going to put some rice into that as well to get your extra 30-40 grams of carbohydrate. Then hopefully you're having an afternoon snack or an early dinner just to bring you up to game time, unless you're going to have a few cereal bars, Rice Krispie bars, or any generally cheap ones, the baked bars that you can buy in Aldi. They're all really good here for extra carbohydrate. That's quite quick to digest. And that's just how we use larger portions and some side servings to bulk out what we're having. Our third option then will be looking at high carb snacks spread throughout the day. These can be had alongside your main meals or in between them all, whichever you prefer. So the first one kind of mentioned already, but looking to have some flapjacks or cereal bars. Essentially, if you're spending time in the car, car, you're munching away on them as you're driving. If you're on a building site, you look as you're moving from one room to another, any chance you can get to get your lunch bag or your car, you're picking up a bar or two and you're eating it as you're walking around. You can be sipping on some juice any opportunity you get, whether it be orange juice, apple juice, or even like some of the, as they call them, multivitamin mixed juices here. Be wary of your stomach and how you respond to some of these, but should be sipping on a large-ish carton of that over the course of the day will give you the extra carbohydrate needs. Another nice little snack there that's quite easy to consume are some brioche buns, or a loaf of brioche. Tends to be quite low in fat but large in carbohydrate, quite palatable, and maybe like before bed you might have a couple of those buns or a couple of slices of it with a glass of milk before, say the night before a big game. It's a way to get that extra carbohydrate on board in a way that's not going to be overly upsetting to your stomach or to drive you crazy going to sleep. The final strategy then is to look at some highly palatable meals that are like cheat meals but will serve the purpose of getting the extra carbohydrate on board. The first one of these is to like make your own pizza. So buy your own base, or you can use wraps. They're probably a little bit on the lower end of carbohydrate here, or you can use some of the like classic bagels and do a little bit of a mix and match. Not just having one here now, but having 2 full bagels to bulk out the overall amount of carbohydrate you need, and you can mix and match the toppings that go on those as well. Pancakes or homemade French toast here can be really good, and bulk those out with some maple syrup or some Nutella for the easy carbohydrate wins that won't really add extra to fill into your stomach. Mentioned already, but get a burrito and fill it up with loads of rice. The large wrap with the extra rice. Or slightly mentioned as well already is just a large pasta dish. It's easy to consume a lot of pasta, particularly once it's fairly palatable, with some side dish or side servings like your naan bread or your garlic bread, or even just if you prefer a slice of brown bread, have a slice of brown bread here with it. Of those 4 strategies touched on there, you can pick one, you can mix and match them all as you go based on what suits you. If you're working on the road, you'll probably need to look at more the snack based stuff. If you know some cafes around that suit you, that's where you can go in and have your pancakes. Earlier in the day of a game, if you're used to meeting up with friends, or you want to try and make an occasion of meeting up with a few friends or teammates while also getting your carb load on, maybe meet up the night before and mix and match pizza bases or bagel bases and taste the different pizzas here. That can be an enjoyable way of getting on all the extra food here as well. It's about finding the strategies that work for you, work around your lifestyle, but also include the foods you enjoy eating and are happy to an extent to eat a lot of, but just find it easier to eat. I'm just going to finish off with 6 common mistakes that I see players make, so you can be proactive about not letting them happen and just not letting yourself get in your own way leading up to each game. These are generally like not eating enough, and they usually come from various reasons around why you want to eat too, and we'll call this healthily, and some of the like messaging around trying to reduce overall carbohydrate impact, and because the various public health concerns that come along with that, which is generally the opposite of what we want leading into big games. So the first one will be, and back to our example that I gave of a player earlier, is just too much vegetables across the day. In general, vegetables are really good for your day-to-day health. Loads of fibre, loads of micronutrients will also fill up your stomach so you don't overeat too much other stuff. We don't really want that leading into a game, because first of all, the fibre in vegetables is actually quite slow to digest. We want fast acting carbohydrate leading up to our game. Secondly, we don't want to fill our belly too much with stuff that doesn't have an awful lot of carbohydrate in it, so it leaves more room for larger volumes of carbohydrate that will then digest faster and fuel what we want to do playing a match. Second then, and links to the vegetable, is eating carbohydrates that are just too high in fibre. And look at 2 examples from teams or individuals I previously worked with. So I used to work with a couple of strongmen, like elite level certainly at the national level and some international competitions as well. And they'd like be really heavy, up like 110, 120 kg, particularly in their, we'll say, competition phase. And they found it hard, one of them in particular, to get up to that weight. And I started looking at his diet, and he was just eating too healthy. For breakfast he'd have lean bacon medallions and homemade brown bread. I'm like, man, why are you eating so healthily here? Make it as easy as possible to get as many calories on board as possible just to get to the size you need to get there. So I pulled out the traditional healthy soda brown bread and just started eating loads of slices of toast. I just found it way easier to eat like half a slice pan for breakfast alongside normal rashers instead of the leaner bacon medallions. The other example I'll give is, I was working with a team and I used to have a lot of like, we'll say debates. You could go to the point of saying arguments, but we'll just say debates with the caterer, because he was very focused on trying to get the players to eat public health wise as healthy as possible. So if we had an early game and we were meeting for breakfast, he'd insist on brown bread, and I was like, it'd be so much easier if we could put on toast. Not putting on toast, there'll be a queue. Brown bread is healthier, it looks so much better laid out than just a pile of toast. And like, they just couldn't eat enough of it. They weren't getting enough fuel on board, to the point of end up saying to players, look, will you get up and have a few slices of toast yourself before you come along? If you want to eat some pound of brown bread, do, but have some snacks along there with you, because the caterer just isn't playing ball here with having the real easy to consume carbohydrates here that's easier for you as players to get on board. Again, ties in with like popular public health messaging here is avoiding liquid calories. General day to day, if you're not super active, avoiding liquid calories is one of the easiest ways of trying to control overall calorie consumption to stop excess weight gain. Particularly now for players who get nervous leading up to games, liquid calories can be a huge help here. They're an awful lot easier to consume. If just because of nerves you find it hard to eat solid foods, orange juice, Lucozade Sport, apple juice, smoothies even, although again watch the fibre content here, are just easy ways to get a lot of calories, predominantly from carbohydrate, in an easy to digest format on board, even if your belly isn't playing ball because of the nerves or the butterflies that are floating around there. I know one like prominent inter-county hurler, he was saying one day he'd actually start with a triple breakfast because he just couldn't eat dinner or lunch coming up to the game, and that was all just liquid calories in the lead up to that. The fourth one then is avoiding the easy calorie add-ons like your Nutellas, your maple syrups, or using the low calorie versions of them when there's absolutely no need. You're trying to get as much calories and carbohydrate and even sugar on board here. So having the zero sugar drinks, the low calorie maple syrup, or just avoiding Nutella in general because like, oh, they're unhealthy. For your particular state, health is having enough carbohydrate on board to perform at your best, not going for low calorie options. The fifth one is more behavioural than nutrition based, but it's just generally not having a plan. If you're someone who works on the road a bit, you have a game in the evening time, it might be a Tuesday evening game, a Friday evening game, you set off, you're going to work and you're like, oh, I need to eat a lot of carbohydrate today, what will I have? And you're depending on access to shops and just cost of living and everything. The price of an awful lot of foods, no matter what they are, has gone really expensive. So you start looking for maybe cheaper options that just might not suit what you're doing. Having stuff in your car, a few boxes of cereal bars, or known places on the routes you generally travel that you can go in, a cafe with good budget options, a few delis you can go into that will still have decent foods for you, or just the foods you like to eat, the lunches you like to get, the snacks you like to get, know what they are or have access to them in the car. And if that means having a couple little containers to keep food cold, keep food warm, or just keep it generally fresh, it's worth investing in because it's probably not the last game that you're going to have or the last train you're going to have that you need to get a lot of the right foods into you for. So it's worth being prepared now because it'll have a lot of knock-on positive effects for future games, trends, etc. Last mistake happens so often is not starting your carbohydrate load enough ahead of time. If you're 6 hours out from a game, you're like, oh, I haven't eaten enough, I'll start eating loads now. That's when you're more likely to feel bloated, feel uncomfortable and feel sluggish come game time. A lot of players are like, did you eat loads? Yeah, I ate loads. I had a massive dinner about 2 hours ago. Then after the game, how'd you feel? I felt awful, so sluggish. This carbohydrate loading doesn't work for me. It will work for you if you start much further out. Look for generally around 24, maybe 36 hours out. If you have a 7:30 game, dinner the day before, 6, 5:30, 7 o'clock, that's the time to start. If you have a Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon game, Saturday, put the day into all that fuel is when you need to be getting on board. Particularly if you're someone who tends to get nervous, or you find some foods don't sit that well leading up to games, then the further out you start, it just gives you that little bit more wiggle room coming up to the game. You just need some smaller, lighter snacks that stop hunger coming on board if you have all that carbohydrate loading done well in advance. If you want a bit more detail, there is a nutrition cheat sheet with a built-in carbohydrate loading guide in the description below. If you have any particular questions or specific situations you want some help with, feel free to drop me a message either through any of my social media platforms or via email. If there's any other specific topics you want, particularly as we come to the in-season phase discussed on YouTube or on the podcast, feel free to let me know and I'm happy to take smaller dives, put a few smaller questions together in one video or one podcast, or take a deeper dive, spend a little bit longer onto it, such as this one here, then feel free. I'm open to suggestions around stuff like this. If you found this helpful, please share it with players on your team, teammates, so that you're all well fueled and can put the training you have been doing up to now to good use for the big matches that are coming August, September, October, hopefully deep into the winter. And for more evidence-based but practical approaches and stuff, check out the video up here.